Yeah, well, first, thank you for inviting me. I also apologize for my English. My English department didn't open today, so I will try to do my best. Feel free to interrupt me if there's something that you don't understand because of my English or because I'm not doing well the context translation. So just to add to my presentation and also to understand what I'm gonna talk about, I'm part of Barcelona comù. I was a councillor in the Barcelona government from 2015 to 2019, but I originally come from the social movement, mostly of housing right and city and right to the city movement. And I was for a long time involved in the platform affected by mortgages, the stop eviction movement. So I will start from there in order to talk about housing fight. And in order to explain a little bit the Spanish context concerning housing rights and concerning how public policies that affected housing are being evolved, I will share a video. It's not the 8 minutes that we will see. We will just see 2 or 3 minutes of it, but I think it will be better than me explaining to be able to see this video that we actually did when I was part of this affected by mortgages platform. Let me know if you have any problem to hear it.
La PA presenta De la burbuja a la obra social. Capítulo 1. La burbuja. Un día, hace unos cuantos años, un presidente muy español tuvo una ocurrencia.
Coño, I have a dream.
Y se concentró tanto, que acabó provocando el milagro español. Convirtió el ladrillo en oro.
España va bien.
Y así empezó a inflarse la burbuja inmobiliaria en este país, que apostó todo su crecimiento económico a una sola carta: construir y construir y construir y construir y construir pisos para vender hipotecas. Los supuestos expertos nos dijeron:
tranquilos, si sube la oferta, bajarán los precios.
Pero funcionó exactamente al revés. Se dispararon los precios de las viviendas, la corrupción urbanística y la especulación. España se convirtió en un mercadillo de hipotecas.
Hipoteca, últimas ofertas.
Muchas posibilidades.
Unos cuantos se hicieron muy ricos. Y cientos de miles de familias nos endeudamos de por vida. ¿Para comprarnos yates, cochazos de la muerte o viajes de superlujo? No. Para acceder a un bien de primera necesidad, un piso en el que vivir.
Solo tienes que firmar aquí. Nosotros nos encargamos del resto.
No fue un estado de locura colectiva. Nos engañaron. Tanto los bancos como los gobiernos del PP y del PSOE, rehenes de sus intereses.
Quizá España tenga el sistema financiero más sólido de la comunidad internacional.
No era un milagro, era un espejismo. Y como todo espejismo, se desvaneció.
Pero si no es oro, es solo un ladrillo.
Y la burbuja estalló, como ha pasado en todas las crisis cíclicas que necesita este sistema para regenerarse. Cuando se infla, unos pocos ganan mucho. Cuando se desinfla, muchísimos lo pierden todo. Injusto, ¿verdad? El paro se disparó y la economía se hundió. El mantra neoliberal de si te hundes, culpa tuya y allá tú, funcionó exactamente al revés con los bancos, a los que rescatamos con nuestros impuestos. ¿Con alguna contraprestación social? No. Al contrario, recortes y ejecuciones hipotecarias. Y cayó sobre nosotros el peso de una ley injusta ideada para proteger a las entidades financieras.
Según el código bla 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 bla, artículo bla 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 bla, tenéis que abandonar vuestra casa y seguir pagándola de por vida, incluidos todo tipo de intereses abusivos con vuestros bienes presentes y futuros. Además, os condeno a quedar marcados de por vida con el estigma de
Morosos. Capítulo 2. La paz. ¿Tienes?
So that's more or less to introduce the Spanish context, just to know after the subprime crisis, there was like a huge public rescue of the banks. We have in Spain, we have like 2% of all the houses are public social housing. So there's a lack of social housing. And at the same time, you have like, I don't know, I really don't know how it works at the UK, but if you rent a house, you have a contract for 5 years, and after that, the price of the rent can be increased as much as the owner wants. So you're always changing. Well, there are a lot of people changing their houses after 5 years. So you have like no public policy that has been done for housing rights, mostly like giving fiscal benefits to the banks and to the private market. And this way of have this economy based on building up houses and so on, but no really public policy for that. So in 2009, after 2 years after the subprime crisis, the thing was there were a lot of families that could not pay the mortgages. They were gonna be evicted. They have to pay. After the eviction, you have to continue to pay the debt that you have with the bank, and you have no public policy in order to have social housing that can be used by these families. So one of the problems that we detected that was, it can sound that it's not important, but I think it's very important, is that this success culture that if you don't have a house, your own home, it's your fault, made that the people were really ashamed of being evicted or of saying that they had a debt with the bank. And I think that's very, very important because actually one of the big achievements of La Paz, of the platform affected by mortgages, I think was saying, no, that's a collective problem. And there are also people that are responsible for that is concerning the governments and the banks. So we built up, well, when La Paz was built up, like in 2009, it was built up with what I call a multi-level strategy. I mean, it was the idea of La Paz was, okay, we have like laws that have to be changed. We want to conquer the housing right, but at the same time, if we are maximalist, we will like push people away, like normal people, to say it in some way, or people that do not come from social movement. So La Paz had this like multi-level strategy, which meant it was a platform that was making lobbying, like presenting legal initiative. I will talk about this later. That was also using all the international organizations that we have that have like legitimacy to encourage the government to guarantee housing. I mean, like the resolution of the United Nations that talk about housing, the Social Rights Committee, what has said about housing. I mean, we were using all these instruments in order also to generate, to say it some way, hegemony about why housing right is a right and why it was not the fault of the mistake of people losing their house. But there was also a strategy that meant negotiating with the bank. So if one family was going to be evicted of their house, trying to negotiate to get a social rent in the same house, or trying to negotiate that they get evicted, but they don't have the debt their whole life with the bank. So the negotiation level was also very important. And then if everything failed, we also use like civil disobedience and direct action, peacefully direct action. So it was like this. And we also like work a lot with the media and so on in order to try to build up a kind of hegemony. So in this sense, and I think one of the things that I was more in love with LAPA actually in the way of organizing, and I think that was one of the big success of the PA being able also to build up community, which I think is very important, no? And also to transmit to people that were joining the PA that there's hope. I think that politically, hope is one of the most valuous things that we have in order to provoke change. So it was that in La Paz, there were not people that were experts, like legal experts that were advising the others that did not know anything, which was something that, people came very depressed to the platforms the first times that they come. No? The bank has been telling them that that they have failed in their life, that they will have this debt, that social services will come and take up their children if they don't pay the debt. Like a lot of lives, people came very depressed. So one thing also, because laws concerning mortgages in Spain are like very, very easy to understand and very unjust. So there was a way of organization. I don't know if, for people being part of grassroots movements, I guess, you know, other ways that are also very useful. But it was like, there were no experts. If you wanted to join La Paz, you just had to come to an assembly, to a meeting, explain your case, and everyone was gonna give you advice of what to do. And we would organize to go with you to negotiate to the bank, to go to you with you to the social services. So everyone was getting experience and was able to give advice after a while to the new ones coming. And every assembly, every meeting, the welcome meetings that we said, it started with what we call the big little victories. What meant, okay, maybe we still have not changed the laws, but yesterday we stopped the eviction of Yasima and Isram. And then it's like making people that they could, that people could identify themselves with the problems that the person that was explaining that their eviction or the negotiation with the bank was successful. You could identify yourself very easy with this person. And also it was like, for me, it was like a place of dignity also, which was like very, very empowerment. Also like hearing people saying, okay, 5 years ago, I came here after trying to commit suicide, after thinking that nothing will go further. And now yesterday I got my social rent and I got the rent. So it was like, I think it was a very, very important thing in order to generate, this kind of empowerment, which I think was part of the successful of La Paz, this building up community, having this multi-level strategy and building up this kind of hegemony, which means, okay, we try to be ambitious, but not maximalist. So we were our main demands were like very common sense demands, like social rent for those that cannot pay the eviction, that people that are evicted do not have to pay for the debt with the banks, and stop evictions. No, it was like, okay, we want the right for housing right now, because it's like very abstract and it's very difficult. So we just will demand common sense demands, which meant that at some point, 80% of the Spanish population was supposed to be supporting the demands of La Paz. At that time, we had the Conservative Party at the government, which was not the best way of changing the laws. So inside this strategy of also lobbying, we collected, in Spain, you have a mechanism in order to propose that the law is changed, and you have to collect 500,000 signatures for that, so that this proposal is discussed, not approved, discussed in the parliament. So we had to collect 500,000 signatures. We collect 1.5 million signatures. And it was discussed, and the Conservative Party, PP, had the majority, so the discussion failed. So we failed after collecting this 500,000 signatures. So at that time, La PA continue. So, but I will switch off to my other life of being in a government. So also during these years, in 2011 in Spain, there was the Indignados movement. I don't know if you remember that. I feel very old talking about that. But actually, so some of us joining that we had been activists for a long time. And after this, this block in the parliament of changing the law, we start thinking, okay, maybe we have to run for elections, we have to join the institutions. And actually some of us, we came more from the autonomous or libertarian culture, no, like more from, we were like always confronting institutions, but we thought, okay, maybe it's the time now to think in another way. It's like, the idea wasn't, don't want to change the faces of who are there. We want to change the way of how politics can be done. So that's a very, very long, explanation. I will try to put you later a 1-minute video. But we decided to build up, and in this sense, the party system, or I don't know how to call it in Spain, is different and as in England. Like for example, in the last Catalan elections we had 1.5 weeks ago, there were like 9 different parties running for elections. So, and mostly in Catalonia, they...
Doncs jo venia d'aquesta generació, suposo que som...
Sorry. And also in Catalonia, you have like this tradition of municipalist in it, where like you can have like different people running for elections in their own municipality, that people that are already involved in municipalism, like in social movements or whatever. So we thought, okay, one thing that we have learned from La PA is that it's important not to have the ideological discussion, but to have the discussion about the common goals. So everyone that wants to shares these goals that we have about concerning the right to the city, so to say it in a very, very brief way, can join us. So we integrated parties that were existing previously, and people coming from the social movement, and people that had not been before in politics. So after the campaign, we won the elections, which was something that we were not expecting, actually. Don't put that on the recording, but we didn't have budget, we didn't have like the media, the support of the big media. No one, the big lobbies in the city didn't want us to win the elections, but after we won, so we had to govern the city, which, well, Barcelona, if you compare it with, I know, with cities in Latin America, it's not such a big city, but it's the second biggest city in Spain. So actually, we were the government, coming without experience, but with a very hard sense of responsibility and a lot of love to our city. But when you enter the institution, the thing is you don't have all the competences that you would like to do all the things that you think that have to be done. So here I just have 10 minutes, but I will try to speak very fast, like some policies that we implemented, and at the same time, which I think is much more difficult to recognize and to systematize, but I think it's important, is how we deal with the social movements in order to get these common goals concerning housing that we had, and which kind of tension of crush and conflicts meant it also, because at least the city is conflict and you always crush with these different kinds of interest. So there is very few competences in the municipal level concerning housing in Spain. But I think we took some of the demands, or mostly of the demands, that could be implemented in the municipal level from the social movements. So for example, until we entered the government, there was no implication of the municipal level in evictions. There was no one, like, because this is like something that concerns to the law. This is a law that depends on the central government in Madrid. So the city council was not involved. So we created a kind of unit or department of people that that are mostly in the street and that are the ones in charge of detecting in which cases that have contact with social services, that have contact with grassroots movements in the neighborhood, that have contact with different initiatives that could end in an eviction. So this like new municipal workers, they try to contact the owners of the flat, the house, whatever, and negotiate with them, trying to negotiate with them that the family can remain in the house, or negotiate with them that the city council will pay part of a social rent. It depends also if we are talking about a big owner, like someone that owns like hundreds of a bank or something like that, or a small landlord. Do you say landlord? Yeah. Or a small landlord that just has this house in order to be that her or his daughter is able to live there. So with this new unit, years.
Is Gala frozen for everyone else as well?
The other thing is trying to, well, someone is saying something in the chat, but I'm not able to read it and talk at the same time. So the second thing was implementing or trying to make as fast as possible so much social housing as we could. But that's very slow. And now actually we have now a very, very important housing emergency in the city, and I think all over Spain. The other thing was also promoting other ways. I look at it in the dictionary because I don't know how to call it. Other ways of knowing, of having houses. I mean, other forms of housing tenor, like cooperative housing in public land, so that you could have this cooperative that is a way of avoiding speculation also. So, well, we implement, and we also like put the central government in order to change laws, not only concerning mortgages, but also concerning how to limit the price of the rent, like a little bit also copying the model of Berlin. I know if you know about this Berlin initiative that makes that rents have a limit of how much people can pay concerning where the house is and the income and so on. So there are a lot of other things. We also promoted public-private operadors, like collaboration in order to promote private housing in a way that it's been able to be paid, which is not something that happens. Well, there are a lot of things, but in order not to be too long, for me, the most interesting thing, or the thing from what I learned more, was, okay, you're not the government, you know, social movements, people will ask you and will wait you to do all what you have promised, and much more than you have promised in the campaign, also because there were like big expectations. And at the same time, you have to be able, to identify which common goals do you have with the social movements, if these are your competences or not, and how can you achieve it. So there are like different different experiences, examples. I think they were good. Like, for example, there is a Catalan law that allows the public administration to oblige the private landlords that are gonna build new houses, new buildings, that to oblige them to make that 30% of these new buildings have a social housing. This law exists since about 15 years ago, and no Catalan public administration had implemented them. So social movements present us a proposal in order to make that in Barcelona, something like that would be, will be a must to be done by private landlords. And for the first time in 15 years, and it was also good because you have all these economical lobbies in the city that are trying to push the government to the other side, to the side where you benefit more the privates and not so much the people. So this kind of social leadership that is also supported by the government and that generates another kind of public debate, that it's not the debate or the conflict between parties, but the debate about social housing and right to the housing led by social organizations, I think is like the best one. That does not mean that there were like conflicts and that there were tensions, and also like there have been and there are a lot of evictions in Barcelona, and the city council does not have enough public housing to put the families in this public housing when they are evicted. So there's always a lot of tension there, which I think is normal. And actually now one of the things that is not concerning my government experience, but my political organization is also part of a government coalition in the central state in Madrid. And there was like a compromise of regulating rents with this new government, like lefty government. And the Socialist Party just said 3 days ago they we're not gonna do that. So now I think one of the challenges that we have is how, being a minority part of the government, but being part of the government, can you work with social movements in order to get this compromise of the big. And actually this afternoon we have demonstrations in different parts of the country in order to demand this rent regulation. So I will stop it here, not to talk more than I was asked to. I don't know if I talked too much. I talked too much, sorry. And I hope there was something that, well, you could understand at least one part, a small part of what I said.
Gala, you're not talking too much, and we also have a little bit more time. So I think it would be really lovely if we can ask Gala some questions, but thank you first for explaining that so well to us. I think that it was really interesting for me, having heard it so many times spoken about, but never spoken from within. So it's really great to hear that. Gala, I'm going to kick us off with a question, because I was really interested in what you said about doing politics differently. Would you tell us a little bit more about what that means, and also what that means physically, in terms of, you know, how you meet, how you get people involved, how you write policy? I'd be really interested to hear more about that.
I'm glad you make me that question. Well, it's not so easy actually, and we said it a lot, and then you enter the institution and the institution takes you and smash you inside the institutional structures, and you try to go out all the time, and it's not so easy. But there are different levels. Like one is the normal, like the legal level, to say it some way. So we try to change the participatory rules concerning the city council so that people collecting signatures could force the city council to make a kind of referendum about things that are competence from the city council, with the idea that citizens' participation has to do with redistributing power and not with asking the opinion to the citizens, or not just to asking opinion to the citizens. And it was so the case that one of the biggest, the company that is managing the water, which is a private company, take us to court, and these new participatory laws are still in court because the company is like fighting against this, being able to collect signatures to ask if we want public management of water or not. So this would be a kind of level. The other one, and it's one thing that happens when you enter the government, which was very surprising for me, is that it's very easy that people get scared about conflict, where I think that, yeah, the city is conflict. It's this conflict of interest. And mostly the way of manifesting conflict in the streets is the way that people that are not the legitimate subjects, that are the invisible one, is the way that they have to protest or to show that there are some kind of interest, mostly general interest, that is been dismissed by public administration. So inside the institution, there's always like, you have to work by consensus, which sometimes consensus mean maintaining a kind of status quo where things would not change. So I won't say all Barcelona comù, but I think we could deal more or less in another way with this idea of conflict, knowing that conflict is also the way of getting power back to these people that are invisible. And there's another thing that for me was very important, and I guess it's very different of the context of the UK, but that's very small, and it can sound very stupid, but we started to make things in different languages like Urdu, Tagalog, Arabian, and so on, in order to say also the residents of different origins that they were part of the city and we were. So, and for example, I think there's one thing I love very much, that the mayor, well, now no, because we have a global pandemic, but she goes every 2 weeks to a different neighborhood to talk to the neighbors. So it's open mic. Everyone can talk and say whatever they want to. Like it's not she talking about something, like she just listens and then she answers the questions that are made. And you can ask her about, I don't know, what she thinks about climate change, or why the bus stop in your street was changed. I mean, you can ask her about. So this kind of like being next to the people, I think it's very important. In my case, I had like a kind of bonus track to say it somehow, because I was the councillor of the district. I had been part of the neighborhood movement. So I knew a lot of people. I mean, I had these informal spaces also to talk to a lot of people with some kind of confidence, which I think is very important. Actually, well, yeah, I stop here.
Sorry. We have a bit of time. Do people have questions for Gala or comments? And you can put it in the chat. Or I think actually, Laura, we can probably see if people raise their hands next to it. There's like a little raise the hand function as well, if you wanted to just. Cool, and we're gonna, yeah, Jess?
Would you recommend going into government?
I think when you have a complex problem, you need a complex strategy to confront it and to solve it. So I don't think going into government is the solution. I don't think so. I think it must be it's good that it's part of the strategy. But if you lose the perspective that normally the biggest changes have come from social movements and from people demand, that's a mistake. But also if you lose the perspective, or if you don't incorporate the perspective that institutions, public administration have the capacity of transforming reality, I think you are also missing something. So I think we do politics in order to transform reality. So in each context and in each moment, you have to implement the strategy where all the different levels can play a role in order to get this common goal. I sound like a self-help book or something like that, no? No?
Well, maybe it's a mutual help book.
No, but yes, one thing concerning that, I think which is very important not to forget when you join institutions, and also is that in politics, confidence is a very weak thing. I mean, no one is gonna give you confidence. It has to be built up. So I think it's very important to be able to have these mechanisms in order to build up this confidence. And that means sometimes that we mix the idea of transparency with being like we had like a lot of corruption problems in Spain when we ran to elections. As I thought your mayor also was arrested in Liverpool for corruption. So I think transparency is very important, but transparency is not just sharing a lot of documents and information. Is also thinking that people are not stupid and that they can understand complexity, and means sharing this complexity so that people can have the best diagnosis of reality in order to think of the strategy they want to build up in order to follow a political goal, to say it somehow.
We have actually got a question from Joe, and then Paul has his hand up, and Niels is asking something in the chat, and then Laura. So if we start with Joe, do you want to just ask your question? Just unmute yourself.
Thanks very much, Gala. Thank you so much for the presentation. It'd be great to have a website and more information to learn and share that knowledge here. One of the debates and tensions in the UK is around council housing that's owned by the local authority, social housing that's owned by third sector organisations, housing associations in particular, some charities, and community-led housing that's much more driven from the grassroots up, including housing cooperatives. So how do those tensions play out in Barcelona?
Claro, actually here's like very different, I think, because like you have Barcelona is one of the cities in Spain where more people are renting a flat or a house. And you have like, I don't know how it's called in English, like big and small landlords, but you have a lot of big landlords, and mostly of the evictions and the rent problems come from this big landlords. And you have like this diversity of owning the land. You don't have it so much. So it was much more how to be able to negotiate with the banks that own a lot of flats and houses in the city and that do not want to make social rental to people, to vulnerable people, than not having to deal with this kind of diversity of landlords owning the land. Actually, it was really, I think, I would have to check it, but I think there's no other city of most of 100,000 inhabitants in Spain that has public land belonging now to cooperative in order to build cooperative housing. So I mean, it was really something very new in 2015, 21st century. So I guess the context is too different in order to, yeah.
And Paul, I think you have your hand up.
Yeah, just an observation really, but really interesting in how, you know, that notion of political control and involvement seems sometimes over there. And you kind of, you know, we get who we elect and that people can play much bigger role in that. And particularly in our city, I mean, it is interesting, we're getting more younger people getting involved in politics and some really interested, committed people here in our region. But also, you know, last week, I think people know Safe Regeneration, who were delivering a big community-led housing scheme for Bootle, one of the poorest parts of the country in the UK, had their planning application thrown out last week because of just a truly archaic and shocking planning committee. And actually, the fact that nobody is, you know, we have councillors that have been councillors for decades who don't kind of know where they are. And actually, so we get what we kind of sow kind of thing. So I just think it's really inspiring that opportunity to take control. Yeah, so I just wanted to say that really, fantastic.
Well, I agree. Also, yeah, I thank you. I don't think that I have nothing to add to what you said.
And I think there is a question that Niels asked about switching sides. Do you lose something in switching sides? So I guess he talks, you know, regarding to trust within the activist movement, like when you move into government, what does that do to your biosystem, I guess, of and the power.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
So do you lose something, he asked, in switching sides? And he said regarding to trust within the activist movement.
I actually have wrote a book about it, but it's in Spanish, so I cannot recommend it to you. But well, for sure that you lose things, and that, but I think we have to be optimistic always, and trying to have like the optimist lecture of our experiences. And I think one thing that for me was a privilege of being part of the government was that you have like this very big and complex photography of the reality that you are managing, to say it somehow. So, and I was very lucky because I had like a lot of friends that remain in activism. So I could have this, as I said, these informal meetings and places to exchange opinions, and also to not lose this point of view of the outside. What I lost was years of life, I'm sure of that, and a lot of hairs also. But I really think that if you are able to share this complexity and to think in a collective way with people that are doing things outside, you can win a lot of things. And before the next questions, I will put you in the chat the email of the International Commission of La Plataforma Afectados of the Stop Eviction movement, just because I'm not, La PA is an independent movement, so the ones that entered the government will left the platform. But also if anyone wants to contact them, they're very glad normally to share the experience.
So I think we have...
Well, what you're saying, Rod, about also the speed, the different speed, which is, I always say that 6 months in real life are 3 seconds in public administration. So this way of leading with the different speeds, it was something that generated a lot of anxiety to me and to other people of the government.
We have one last question that comes from Laura White, and she says, I'm really interested if you think this idea could translate to areas with historically low levels of social action and political engagement.
I hear you very low.
Yeah, I can say again, she's really interested to hear if this idea could translate to areas with historically low levels of social action and political engagement.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess there's also a question of maybe how that could translate. That's a very steep question to end on.
Claro, if I understand it well, the question...
people are not so engaged politically.
Sí. Claro, in this case, I will go rather to the experience of the platform affected by mortgages than to the government experience, because I really think that this idea of building up community, I mean, mostly of the people that have joined the PA, they say the PA is like a family. And I think there was very important, like we used a very normal language to say it somehow, like there was no ideology transmitted. Like, okay, you were making demands that could be more from the left side, that were from the left side, to say it somehow, but we were not using an ideological discourse or language. It was also, we try also when we were speaking with media that there were the affected people talking. I don't know if you have experience in that, but I've seen a lot of other collectives and so on where the activists, the professional activists are the ones that give the discourse. And in this case, La PA was very, well, we were very careful of the affected people being the ones that talk about their problems and their demands. And yeah, well, I know I'm sure mostly of you have much more experience or have a lot of experience about community action, which is like this kind of invisible action that is not that does not have to do in a first level with political demands, but that after that can come to political demands. And I think it's actually the only one of the responses to one of the answers to the question you are asking, but it's not so, I know it's not so easy to mobilize people that are not mobilized normally, or that do not come from a city or from a region that has this tradition. I mean, Barcelona has a long tradition of neighborhood movement, of anarchist movement, of working class movement, and so on, which is something that helps. But yeah, at the first level, it's always the community action, I would say, which is not the big answer, but I don't have any other answer.
Thank you so much, Gala. We're gonna call you back in for a little conversation in the end.